I want to talk PPA because this article on the TES from Mark Roberts talks about how PPA hasn't solved teacher workload, which I completely agree with. When it was introduced in 2005-6, it was supposed to make things better for teachers. The idea was 10% of their non-contact time would be ring-fenced and protected to ensure that planning and marking would be done in school hours, not in their own time. Let's say I was to ask a few teachers who were teaching before 2005, and I don't think there's many of them left in the profession because we're one of the only jobs where actually the more experience you have, it gets used against you now. But if I was to ask them, well, do you think things are easier now than they were in 2005? I'd hazard a guess. Not many would say yes. But this idea that PPA time was supposed to make things better clearly hasn't. I'll share some of the reasons from this article as to why PPA hasn't had the intended impact, but I just want to talk about my view on it. And I don't think this is PPA's fault, really. But I would put PPA and the holidays together in this idea of it sort of gaslights teachers, and it allows people to say, no, you should be doing more. No, you should be taking on more workload, because don't forget those perks you get like PPA and holidays, even though most teachers work the majority of the holidays. But it's this idea that PPA as non-contact time just invites more and more unnecessary workload. But this idea that teachers can just carry on taking on more because, you don't forget, you get a bit of PPA. You get that time to do all of that. And I think if you were to do a little survey of what teachers spend their PPA time doing, I reckon very little of it, hardly any of it, has any real impact on teaching and learning in class. It again goes back to the obsession with accountability, the fact we're not trusted, the fact that there are some schools where SLT sit in on teachers' PPA time to monitor what they do. Genuinely, that happens. I had a message about it. My reply was, run. Leave that school as soon as possible. Let's go through some of the reasons mentioned in this article. Covering PPA is difficult, which obviously it is. It is so hard for SLT school leaders because of the lack of funding. So ideally, what you want is a qualified teacher to cover PPA, which is what I did for a while in my school. I taught computing across the whole school, which covered teachers' PPA time. But when schools don't have two pennies to rub together because of chronic underfunding over the years, what ends up happening? Well, it's a case of either preying on the goodwill of TAs to step up and cover PPA, or just not give teachers that time. It's backed up with some teacher tap data showing 13% of situations covered by a TA and only a quarter is actually covered by another teacher. There are concerns that standards can drop during PPA cover. Again, a teacher tap question said only 39% of teachers agreed that the quality is as high in those lessons as it would be normally. Allocated PPA time is far than guaranteed. According to another teacher tap survey, just 1/3 of teachers have their PPA as normal. Teachers who lost their precious PPA time commonly did so because they were being asked to attend a meeting, directed to do some other work during that time. And as I've sort of touched upon, the fact that our workload is more now than ever before, PPA time just is not enough. It's not realistic to think that in one afternoon you can get through all of the planning, prep and pointless marking expected. And that doesn't even include all the extra responsibilities you have to undertake as a teacher now without any extra pay, thanks to Ofsted's deep dive nonsense and how your PPA time may well be spent gathering as much data as possible around the subject you lead in your school. What are some solutions? Well, the government have obviously announced recently that teachers should be able to take their PPA from home, even though only 1/3 are allowed to take their PPA from home at the minute. Another suggestion here is that you actually reduce student contact time, so you shorten the school day, maybe 1 day a week, send children home with a couple of home learning tasks, I don't know, and then teachers can have that focused PPA time without being called out or issues that arise in class taken away from that PPA time. But I'll tell you this now, that's not going to go down well with parents, is it? So I can't see that one working personally. One that I can get behind is this idea that actually we just stop all this unnecessary workload. Let's have a frank discussion about the time, what teachers are being asked to do in their PPA time. Is it having an impact on teaching and learning? If not, stop doing it. And here's a genuine question for any teacher watching this. Would you sacrifice your PPA time if you didn't have to do that ridiculous amount of work? Let's say we ban marking, right? You never have to mark a book again, but it meant that you didn't have PPA time. Let's say you didn't have to follow laborious planning pro formas where you're just padding your planning out for the sake of padding it for whoever checks your planning. If you didn't have to do that anymore, would it mean you'd sacrifice your PPA? Genuine question. Let me know in the comments.